Hey guys, Will Durst here with a few choice words about a group, a wonderful group, doing some great work, and they're called ethicsinTech.com. And I know what you're saying, ethics in tech, wow, that sounds like an oxymoron. That's like saying vegetarian butcher, or kosher pork tartare, or Catholic condom supply house, or George W. Bush think tank, or Donald Trump guide to etiquette and manners. And you're right. But they're here to help, and they do with a smile. Every event that you go to will have a comedy component, along with expert speakers and panel discussions and audience community participation. So come on down, check out ethicsinTech.com. And you can see past events, and you can read the blog, and you can see about upcoming events. So ethicsinTech.com. It's simple. And you might want to consider volunteering, or throwing them a couple of bucks here and there. Any and or all donations will be accepted and appreciated. Ethics in tech. It doesn't have to be an oxymoron.
Hi, I'm Vahid Razavi with Ethics Technology. For the past 8 years, we've been focused on ethical use of technology in various sectors, from AI, security, privacy. We've covered it all with our events and our blog. Today, I'm asking you to kindly consider making a tax-deductible donation to Ethics in Tech for turning the tables on the tech sector. As you're well aware, there's a lot of injustice that happens within the tech community, from the gig economy and its underpaid workers to employees such as myself that worked for Amazon and Jeff Bezos that were mistreated while I was there. And as long as we don't speak up, nothing will change. If we don't share what's happening, nothing will become of it and nothing will improve. So we want to turn the table. We want to create an app that targets tech community in corporate America and evaluates it based on how ethical and just they are, not just how great they are for the consumers. So with your help, we're hoping to raise some capital in order to do this. It's not a lot of money, and we can definitely build the app, and we have the experience to do it. We also want to be able to continue to fund our community of comedians, writers, bloggers that contribute content to our various events. With your help, we can do that. In return for your generous contribution, what we are willing to offer is annual memberships in Ethics in Tech that include events, online events, as well as in-person events once we can have them again, as well as access to our applications once it's developed, and of course our blog that's always free and does not serve any ads, and we don't plan to serve any ads on. So we hope you can join us. We hope that we can turn some of the injustice against the employees of these tech companies and be able to make a difference with your help. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Thank you so much for making yourself available. We're excited about the lineup of speakers and comedians that will be presenting tonight. What you just saw was a couple of videos. Our favorite video of Will Durst. We wish him a speedy recovery, and a quick video that we put together promoting ethics and technology. Tonight, we're focused on the Iranian nuclear deal and peace in the Middle East. As you're well aware, speakers and comedians that will be presenting tonight. What you just saw was a couple of videos. I'm getting a loop back on audio. We wish him a speedy recovery, and a quick video that YouTube, please. Promoting ethics and technology. Tonight, we're focused on the Iranian nuclear deal and peace in the Middle East. Excuse us for 1 second. apologies for that. That sounds a lot better now. So yeah, but just want to thank you so much for being part of tonight's event. I'm Vahid Razavi with Ethics and Technology. We're delighted to have a number of notable speakers this evening, as well as comedians. We're going to be talking about a serious topic of nuclear proliferation in the Middle East, specifically the Iranian nuclear deal under JCPOA agreement that the United States under Trump administration decided to pull out of, and its impact on the Iranian community in Iran, and the hardship that they have faced, as well as a future potential of where that negotiation can go. As I mentioned, I was thinking a lot about this tonight's presentation, and as I was rooted in Iran, I grew up in Iran, I was raised in Iran until my 5th grade, and then that's when I came to the States, and I got my pruning and my education here in the States, and I'm grateful for that. We're all here because of Western democracy's ability to give us freedom of speech so we can talk openly about what takes place abroad. In Iran, unfortunately, that is not the case. Under Islamic regime, it's very difficult for people and activists to speak about what takes place under Ayatollah Khamenei. I can say that the sanctions has had a very negative effect on Iranians. 50 to 60% live below poverty line. Medicine and food is hard to obtain. The currency has devalued tremendously. And there used to be a saying in Iran, neither east nor west. And now Iran is being pushed more and more to the east with trade deals that are supposedly 25 years in length with the Chinese. As Iran is progressing, hopefully, to new leadership in the coming decade, there's a lot of questions as to where that leadership is going to go and what loyalties they'll have to both the Iranian people as well as to their international partners. I wanted to mention a particular topic that's really important in Iran, and that's God and religion. I am in no position to talk about people's personal relationship with God. I think that I have a personal relationship on how I believe in God and how I worship, and I think that is unique to each individual. Under state of Islamic State of Iran, religion is the business of the state, and everybody has to ride the same boat to heaven. So it's a challenging environment. I couldn't call myself a human rights activist unless I brought up the human rights violations that were committed against the Baha'i faith. I couldn't talk about the Evin prison that's full of political prisoners. I can't call myself a human rights activist if I don't talk about what happens in Baltimore or Charlottesville or in Gitmo or in Beijing. All these issues matter. Human rights matters, and the International Declaration of Human Rights by the UN applies to us all equally. There is no picking and choosing which country it should apply to. So I hope that is always in the forefront of our discussions and talks, so we don't forget the people that are in jail in Evin. Having said that, I don't live under sanctions. I don't know what that is like. I'm not representing people that do. I am here to have a discussion around it as an American Iranian that has spent 3/4 of my life in the States. So it's really important to clarify that I am not speaking on behalf of the Iranian people or organizations. We're a small organization, Ethics and Tech. We're not funded by any state. We're not funded by any corporation, except for the donations and the generous contributions that we receive from our viewers and our supporters. And we like to keep it that way. We like to keep our independence. So please consider making a contribution so we can keep having these events. Finally, In the past 8 years, Ethics in Tech has made fun of the National Security Agency 3 times. We had held NSA comedy shows. We talked about drones. We talked about killer robots at our events. We talked about the politics of the US. And honestly, nobody knocked on my door and said, Vahid, you can't have these conversations. In one way, I'm blessed that I have the right to freedom of speech. I've even made fun of Jeff Bezos and produced videos and book and contents against the idol of capitalism. Granted, nobody will hire me again in Silicon Valley, but that's my choice. And I had the choice to make that decision and decide that it's important to bring on issues of workers' rights, to talk about these weapons, to talk about the NSA. And I hope the people in Iran can have a choice to be able to criticize their government, to be able to criticize Ayatollah Khamenei, to be able to criticize Ayatollah Khomeini, to be able to discuss their actions. I mean, it's a huge burden to have one person answer to God and God only and represent the interest of the nation to God. You know, I don't need an intermediary. I don't need the Vatican. I don't need no imam in between me and God. My personal relationship is one-on-one. Whatever faith you believe, I support 100%. I welcome diversity, even if you're agnostic or atheist. I go to a church that's a fellowship of all people. It's an interfaith community. I go there for the community benefits, to get inspired. But the reverend there is not my personal connection to God. He doesn't have that responsibility. Now, tonight, as I said, we have a wonderful set of speakers, and one of them is a gentleman that I go to that same community, and he's a Buddhist practitioner at San Francisco General Hospital as an in-house chaplain. He has written a book as well around meditation and mindfulness, Mr. Rick Center. So I'm going to pass it over to Rick, and kindly, Rick, if you could share your wisdom with the audience, it would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Vahid. I would try to share some wisdom, and hopefully after what I share, they still won't be coming after you. And I would say that I'm really honored to be here with such wonderful guests and activists. And my part is talking with Vahid is to share maybe more of hope, the heart. I would say my work as a mindfulness and trauma practitioner, and having been in the hospital as an interfaith chaplain, is an activist of the heart, activist of the mind, and activist of trauma, and how we hold grief and loss, and how we hold that often in fear and anger. So my hope is to actually just share a couple of stories that I hope can be helpful on how to open that up. Because when I look at when we go to the Middle East and even the whole country, how do we look at things? And part of that is actually recognizing our own mind, where we've been hurt, where our traumas are, and where we get blinded, and be able to how to open up the mind to not be caught in between the black and the white, and to find more. So I hope to share a couple of stories that I have found very helpful for me. And in that church, the first part is like when we were talking about God or who we are as being raised Jewish, there's the Jewish part of me that says, oh, I have lots of viewpoints and opinions. And the Buddhist part of me says, well, I really don't know anything. So hopefully what I'm going to share is somewhere in between that. So the first story I'd like to share, as all stories go, we have to go back. So go back in time, go back in history a little bit. These are all these great stories when a long, long time ago. And so we go to a town, and there's a little village in this town. And in the village, there's a farmer, and he owns this plot of land, and he has a daughter. She's around 15 or so. And his wife had passed away. They had no other children. And so they have this farm, and there's been drought. And so in every little town like that, and he actually rents the land, there's also the money lender, the person that owns the land. And he's not He's kind of a grisly old character, we could say. And he's come out to the farm and he's looking for his rent. And he comes up to the old man, he's been behind, and he said, you know, I need your rent. It's time that I get your rent. And he goes, well, you know, we're having this drought. It's been very difficult. He goes, well, I've been letting you off the hook for months. You're going to have to pay up. We're going to have to figure something out. And so he goes, he's looking and he looks at the farmer's daughter. And so he goes, well, maybe marriage or something like that. He's thinking a nice young woman. So he goes, I'll tell you what, if you let me marry your daughter, everything, you don't owe me anything. Your daughter and I can get married. Well, she and dad look at each other and they're like, nah, I don't think we want this grisly old guy. And that's not where we want to go. So, but he's a cunning fellow and he's watching this and he's trying to figure out, okay, well, how can I make this work for myself? So they're out on the farm, but they're also around these pebbles, black and white pebbles. And he goes, I'll tell you what, I've got this little money bag here. And I'm going to put a pebble, a white pebble and a black pebble into the bag. And I'll let your daughter pick one of the pebbles. So if she picks the black pebble, she becomes my wife and all your debts are forgiven. And if she picks the white pebble, then she doesn't even have to marry me and everything's forgiven. And if she refuses to pick either a pebble, you're going to jail. So that's like, okay. So he reaches down and he takes two of the pebbles and he puts them in his little bag. Well, the farmer's daughter is watching his hand and she notices he took two black pebbles and put them in the bag. And she's going, well, this isn't good. There's two black pebbles inside the bag. So imagine you're this little girl. Your life, your father's life, your farm, everything that you've been building on is now up to you and what you choose. So she could refuse to take the pebble, but we know what's going to happen. She knows there's two pebbles in the bag. And what is she going to do? So does she sacrifice herself in order to save her father? So think for a moment, what would you do in this instance? What would you do? Well, the little girl puts her hand inside the money bag and she draws a pebble and has it in her hand. But as she pulls it out, she fumbles and the pebble falls to the ground. And she goes, oh, how clumsy of me. Never mind, let's look in the bag and see which one is left. And then you'll know which one I picked. Well, of course, we know which one is in the bag, the black one. So everything is fine. She doesn't have to marry him. And all the debt is gone. And what the story represents is pebbles are black and white. And what I'm trying to share, most time in life, we're living in the black and white. If we go to the Mideast, from my perspective, we're living in fear and anger. And when we get in the fear and anger, we want revenge and we want hurt. And when we live in the black and the white, we don't see all the creative imagination that's happening between the black and white. So it's lateral thinking versus constrictive thinking. And that means I have to know where I get caught. Where do I get caught up? And so part of what I want to offer in this, the people that are diplomats, the people that are talking to one another, I believe they have to find that place that's not caught up on the either side of the wrong, the right, the good and bad. How do we find out today where we want to begin, and can we break open our imagination to see beyond what we think it's supposed to be? Because that's also everything that we're dealing with in our daily life. And it's actually what's happening in our own country. We're getting caught in black and white, and somehow we need to find a way to bring ourselves all together. And it's not an easy thing to do. So part of what my offering was when I talked to Vahid is possibilities. To me, we have to look at possibilities. We have to create, we have to come open in something. Because if she stayed in her fear, the little girl, and anger at this man wanting to take their farm, she never would have recognized, I can take a pebble and I can let go. And part of it is, what in this world do we need to let go of that keeps us from having peace? What is it that myself and the other that maybe we could find that both of us need to let go of in order to find peace? So I offer that story as one way to look at the mind and how trauma can actually keep us from being able to have creative imagination. So the other one goes to Vahid. You were talking about religion. Well, boy, do we all have different ways we look at religion. And when we have the same religion, we can look at it in all sorts of different ways. So there's actually, I think, a humorous story. I hope it's humorous. And it goes to religion. And this one, again, we have to go way, way back into history. So imagine we're going to go way back, even maybe the Dark Ages. And we're in Rome in the Dark Ages of history. And in the dark of history, in that day, one day in Rome, the Pope decides, you know, I think it's time for the Jews. I'm going to make a decree that all the Jews have to leave Rome. Well, they weren't too happy about that. This is where we live. We want to stay in our home. But they may not have had a choice, but they were saying, we don't want to leave. So the Pope says, all right, how about if we have a disputation? So we'll have a disputation and see who can remain. Well, everyone is like, I don't want to go against the Pope. And if I goof it up, all my people are going to be mad at me. And so no one wanted to do it, except there was one person, and that was Moshe, the janitor at the synagogue. And he said, I'll do it. And the thing was, though, he only spoke Hebrew and the Pope didn't speak Hebrews. So they're going to have this silent disputation to figure out whether the Jews were going to have to leave Rome or not. So anyway, the crowd gathered around, they're all looking, and they're trying to figure out, well, what's going to go on? So the first thing the Pope does, he waves his hand like that in a circle. Well, Moshe, he points to the ground. And the Pope's a little surprised, so he takes 3 fingers, and he takes 3 fingers like that. Well, Moshe takes 1 finger, and he goes like that. Well, the crowd, they start complaining. The Pope says, hold on. And he gets out a bottle of wine and a wafer, and he holds them up. What's Moshe do? He takes out an apple, and he holds the apple up. The Pope, so surprised, he goes, I concede. This man is too good. The Jews get to stay. So the Pope goes over, and all his people are saying, well, what was that about? What the heck just happened? He goes, well, first, I'm showing him the heavens. And he shows me that God is right here. And he points to the ground. So he goes, then I show him the Trinity. I show him 3 fingers, and he shows me there's only one God. And then I figure it's like, well, I'm going to show him, and I take out my wine and my wafer to represent God's forgiveness of man. And what does he do? He pulls out an apple, and he shows me original sin. The man is a master at the debate. So meanwhile, we go over to the other side, and there's Moshe in his corner, and his people are asking him the same question. And they go, what was that? And Moshe goes, it was all nonsense. First, he told me this whole town will be free of Jews, and I told him to go to hell. We're staying right here. Then he told me we had 3 days. Well, I told him what I thought about that. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what goes on. he pulls out his lunch, and I go, well, I might as well take my lunch out too. And what I love about that story is it's how we're looking at the same thing, having a conversation and sometimes we're in so many different places, we don't even talk about the same thing. And we're seeing the same thing from different places. And to me, again, this is what we have to do. If there's going to be talks of trying to get peace, the people that are doing it and those that are speaking, we have to somehow get to the same page and get to the same language and same understanding. And that means sometimes hearing, if this is what I want and I keep pushing it, but someone's saying this over here, I have to pause and meet them and recognize what they're saying so I can find us in the middle. And I think often in these things, everyone's just talking about their needs and their wants. We're not even hearing each other, or we hear each other and we don't, and all of a sudden we're speaking different languages. We can do that in our own family and friends. And I love this story because it makes us look at how language can actually sometimes be difficult when we don't understand and we don't slow down to make sure. So these two stories for me are looking at how to open the mind, how to create possibilities, and look beyond what we think we know and bring it to the present moment and say, what do we want now? We all have a past. We don't know what the future is, but if we're going to have peace, we're going to have to find out how to do it from now. Because we all have our history, we all have our hurts, and we all have our pains. And so we have to do it from now. And so on that, what I would like to do is just end with a little blessing poem for hope and for faith of the heart. And this was a poem that I wrote this at the inauguration. I was so impressed by the young woman and Biden and that day. It's called Hope of the Heart, and I'll end there as a little blessing poem. Today I cried, not for loss, though for hope. Not for perfection, though the richness of possibility. Not to cling to differences, though to see our commonality. To see the game that only love can bring, as we find that anger and hate offer an unbridled fear that will only foster inner coldness and outer pain. May tears of joy wash open the heart of compassion, not to run from, yet to turn towards all that is and will be. Water from the eyes meet the sorrow of what was, moving onward to hold the hand of presence. It is in the present where we stand toe to toe with the unquivering knowledge that perfection is the moment of vulnerable impermanence. That change is what follows change from one moment to the next. Imagination is an openness that enters into the body of human flesh, into the unknown, without fear, though with faith. As Martin Luther King expressed, take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. May people stand together on these steps, which rise into the heavens of a future we cannot see, one in which we are incapable of understanding the totality of what this moment will bring. May love, kindness, and compassion be the blanket that keeps us warm and safe, connected to our humanity. Amen.
Thank you so much, Rick. I greatly appreciate the poetry and the stories and your words of wisdom. Our next speaker tonight is Brett Wilkins. Brett is a board member of Ethics and Tech. From very early on, he's been involved with ethics and technology. He is a staff writer at Common Dreams, as well as Collective 20, which is a activist group and that he has been contributing and writing on their behalf. Brett, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You have the stage.
Thank you, Vahid. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to those of you who have attended our previous Ethics and Tech events. It's great to be back here again with these great speakers and comedians. Well, when Vahid told me that the theme of tonight's event was going to be hopes and dreams for President Biden's Mideast policy, I was quite excited. I envisioned shooting for the stars and discussing a broad dream agenda encompassing everything from ending the never-ending US wars that by now have claimed at least hundreds of thousands of civilian lives in over half a dozen countries, to ending the hypocritical sanctions on Iran, to disavowing dictatorships in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and elsewhere. Now, while Biden may indeed end up doing one or more of these things, and I think he deserves some credit for pulling back some of the US support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen, it's the world's worst humanitarian crisis, it would be a disservice to everyone watching to stick too literally to the hopes and dreams theme. After all, we live in reality, and the crises of our time deserve realistic solutions. And so I've decided tonight to take on a topic that's confounded generations of US policymakers, Israel-Palestine, and how Biden could address it. I know you're probably thinking this is one of the most daunting challenges facing any president, but as you'll soon see, a different approach is not only possible, it's actually been done before, even if just a little bit. First, to tee up my argument, I'm going to read you some excerpts from a human rights report on Israel-Palestine. Bear with me, it's only going to take a minute, and there's a method to my madness. So this report says, quote, significant human rights issues included reports of unlawful or arbitrary killing, arbitrary detention, restrictions on non-Israelis residing in Jerusalem, including arbitrary or unlawful interference with privacy, family, and home, significant restrictions on freedom of movement, killing 132 Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, most victims who posed no immediate threat. Many were shot in their upper body and some in the back. This despite IDF claims that soldiers aimed below the knees with the intention to wound and not kill. On torture of prisoners, the report details, quote, political prisoners, thousands of prisoners held in unsuitable living conditions unfit for human habitation, exceptional measures used during interrogation, including beatings, stress positions, threats of rape and physical harm, painful pressure from shackles, sleep deprivation, and threats against families. The report cites the case of Samer El-Arbid, who was taken to hospital, quote, unconscious with serious injuries, including the inability to breathe, kidney failure, and broken ribs. It also notes the unethical force feeding of prisoners. As for Israel's national, racial, and ethnic minorities, including its own Arab citizens, the report notes, quote, persistent institutional and societal discrimination, and, quote, Israeli leaders who incited racism against the Arab community, before noting incidents of violent attacks, including price tag attacks by settlers on Palestinian people and property. That's just part of a report that also, by the way, discusses the indictment of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for alleged bribery, fraud, and other corruption. So, you may ask, who published this report? Well, it's from 2019. Was it a hostile Arab nation? Was it the anti-Semitic United Nations or BDS movement? Or the self-hating Jews at B'Tselem or of Jewish Voice for Peace? No, it was actually the United States State Department during the Trump administration under the uber-Zionist Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. The recognition is there. Only the commensurate action is missing. The recognition was also there during the Trump administration when it repeatedly acknowledged that Iran was in full compliance with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran nuclear deal, yet Trump unilaterally withdrew from the landmark agreement. We saw similarly dissonant behavior during the Bush and Obama administrations when not only all 16 US intelligence agencies, but also leading Israeli military and intel officials concurred that Iran was not building nuclear weapons, but sanctioned Tehran with devastating effects on the Iranian people, while incessantly threatening to wage a war against a country that hasn't started one since the Persian Empire invaded Afghanistan in 1856. I find it the height of irony that the US imposes crippling economic sanctions on Iran for its non-existent nuclear weapons, while pretending not to see that Israel is the only country in the Middle East that actually has them, and hundreds of them at that. But I do digress. You know, it's easy to take for granted that no matter what crimes Israel government and military may perpetrate against Palestine, and it's the only country on the planet which simultaneously perpetrates invasion, colonization, occupation, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and oppression. No matter what, it can always count on billions of dollars in annual US military aid. It can always count on diplomatic support, even when the members of the United Nations vote 160-2 or 160-3 because Palau or the Marshall Islands or so votes along with us to condemn its crimes. But it doesn't have to be this way. It wasn't always this way. In fact, many of you may know that in 1956, when Britain and France and Israel conspired together on a premeditated invasion of Egypt in order to oust the Arab nationalist Gamal Abdel Nasser from power after he nationalized the Suez Canal, President Dwight Eisenhower threatened to withhold more than $100 million in US aid if Israel didn't withdraw its troops from the occupied Sinai Peninsula. Within a month, they were all out. In the mid-1970s, when the former terrorist turned Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin refused to cede strategic passes to Sinai after Israel again occupied it during the Yom Kippur War, another terrorist, Henry Kissinger, the US Secretary of State, accused Rabin of being, quote, out of his mind, unquote, and President Gerald Ford sent Rabin a letter informing him that he was reassessing US policy and held up the sale of F-15 fighters to Israel. A few short years later, under Jimmy Carter, Israel and Egypt had signed the historic Camp David Accords. After Israel's surprise attack on an Iraqi nuclear reactor in 1981, the Reagan administration worked with Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein to draft a Security Council resolution condemning the raid. And 10 years later, George H.W. Bush, citing a State Department legal opinion declaring Israel's settlements to be illegal, that stood from 1978 until Trump revoked it in 2019, but Bush delayed $10 billion in US loan guarantees to Israel. Within a couple of years, Rabin would be signing the Oslo Accords with PLO leader Yasser Arafat. I'm not saying those things are exactly related, but my point is it's been done before. US presidents have used either the threat of withholding aid or actual withholding to alter Israeli actions. It almost happened when Biden was vice president after Barack Obama called for a settlement freeze, but instead Netanyahu announced the approval of 1,600 new settler homes in the illegally occupied East Jerusalem at the same time Vice President Biden just happened to be visiting Israel. It was a big embarrassment, but aside from a stern phone call from Hillary Clinton and Obama showing up late for a dinner with Netanyahu, nothing came out of it. In fact, on his way out of the door in 2016, Obama vetoed a UN resolution condemning the settlements. And that's the way things are likely to go under a Biden administration, but they don't have to go that way, and they haven't always gone that way. If some of the most staunchly Zionist, conservative, warmongering presidents could dare pursue different policies and actions, surely with the right kind of pressure from the right kind of people, like us, maybe Biden could too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brett. Hope for better days in the Middle East, especially for the Palestinians and their relationship with Israelis. Our next speaker is Norman Solomon. He doesn't need an introduction. He's been a peace activist since 1967 when he went to his first demonstration. Norman and I met at NSA comedy event about 8 years ago. Before making fun of the NSA was kosher, we held an event where we talked about surveillance and Big Brother watching. So Norman, thank you so much for joining us tonight. He is the co-founder of rootsaction.org, as well as Public Accuracy in Reporting. And thank you, Norman, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Vahid, and I'm really glad to be part of Ethics in Tech event again. You know, I'm going to mostly talk about U.S. media coverage of the Middle East. What's wrong with that coverage is very much what is wrong with U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, and that is a failure to have a single standard of human rights. If there was a single standard, then we'd have a much more realistic view from the United States of what's going on in the Middle East. We'd understand U.S. policy better. And I think in the long run, we would be much most of what I understand about the Middle East and U.S. coverage is from reading and listening to people. I haven't been in the Middle East that much. Somebody who has been, who we're going to hear from in a little while, is really great journalist, Reese Ehrlich. And for instance, his book titled The Iran Agenda Today is really a wonderful synthesis of eyewitness reporting and history and analysis. I did get to visit Iran in 2009, and for about 10 days was in Tehran during the ill-fated election that brought to, if not power, at least the presidency, Ahmadinejad. And a couple of moments I wanted to mention briefly, being in a bazaar there, and a salesperson for some underwear said to me, people around the world want peace, and the governments are what get in the way, which on the one hand sounds maybe like a cliche, but very heartfelt and I think very true. I was at a human rights demonstration held by women who were being brutalized by the police. That was also another reality that was very striking to me in Tehran. I think about being in Iraq in 2002 in the autumn and going to a water treatment plant and speaking, said, well, you're so strong. I mean, this was a water treatment plant that was basically non-functional thanks to US sanctions. And when the Iraqi woman was told, you're so strong, she said, no, we're not strong. We're like anybody else. We who took us around Baghdad. And then when we were in the middle of a park and it was just me and me, just two of us, have oil. You know, by that point, it was clear that an invasion was coming. He said, all in the past and in the future in the country of Iraq. And I think of going over the Allenby Bridge, and there on the border is a 19-year-old from Brooklyn, New York, with a rifle, telling me that Palestinians should get out of his country. And he didn't mean the United States, he meant Israel. And I thought of going and went to East Jerusalem and saw Palestinians while the women were standing in line for something. And I think of Mordecai Vanunu, who spent, 2 decades in prison, mostly in solitary confinement, for the crime of disclosing to the world that Israel had nuclear weapons. And here we have the United States threatening Iran for the crime or the allegation of thinking about or endeavoring perhaps maybe to be doing uranium enrichment for nuclear weapons. So it goes to the question in so many ways of single standards, whether human rights or anything else that is put out there self-righteously by the US government and echoed by the US media comes through TV, radio, newspapers, big online media outlets in the United States. So much of it is filtered through the grid of what we are told is reality out of Washington, out of the think tanks, out of preconceived notions of good and bad, and good is usually doing what the United States government wants, and bad is the opposite. And we have this tremendous challenge. I think there's been some progress, certainly in the last years and decades, in shifting the narrative in media. And I don't think we should discount the importance of the independent media that have so often chipped away at the deceptions, the lies, the distortions, the stereotypes that have fueled the militarism, the war, the subsidies for governments like the Saudi government, tolerated or funded armed wars against Yemen, creating all sorts of disasters and reinforcing the injustice. And elsewhere in the Middle East, I think that as discouraging as things often are, that the potential is partially being realized to shift the narratives that then can shift the policies. And that comes from, I think, activism, messaging to members of Congress and other elected officials, and fighting against the sort of the default positions, which are any friend of the Israeli government is a friend of the United States, and any enemy is therefore an enemy. When we look at the Iran nuclear deal and how it almost got derailed the first time around, and how we now have obstacles to reinstating it, so much of it, really, not all of it, but so much of it is that there's a default knee-jerk position from many people in media and a substantial portion of the Congress that if the Israeli government doesn't want it to happen, it shouldn't happen. And so we have that tremendous challenge to continually push up against that. And then there is the equation of Zionism and Judaism, which is fomented and encouraged by a lot of mainline Jewish institutions in the United States and in much of the US media, and also certainly by the Israeli government. And so then it becomes a shield to claim that criticism against Israel is anti-Semitic. And one of the great ironies, of course, is that a lot of Christian Zionism, quote unquote, and some of the most important political support for Israel in the United States is coming from sources who, on their own, are basically anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, but they see Israel as a tool or whatever biblical fulfillment they foresee. So, I'd really just emphasize that as discouraging as things may be, that they would be a lot worse if there hadn't been tremendous media work being done. And I just, for instance, by Reese Erlich, by outlets like Common Dreams, by many people who are working in the vineyard, so to speak, around this country and beyond, who are saying, no, we're not going to just accept the official narrative. We are not going to defer to what's coming out of the government of the United States and elsewhere that fuel war, that fuel xenophobia and hostility to people who have different systems than we do. And also saying that whether it's in the media or political arenas, we can really make a difference. And I think that's clear. And of course, we got a lot of work to do. So onward and upward.
Thank you so much, Norman. I really appreciate your time tonight. And you're right, the media's perspective in the US towards the Middle East is definitely tainted towards war and conflict, and it helps sell guns and weapons to the region. Without those conflicts, we wouldn't be able to arm the Saudis and the Kuwaitis and the UAEs and all the rest, and they wouldn't be purchasing our weapons. So it's definitely one-sided. I want to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Hassan El-Tayeb. Hassan is a very talented musician, and also he's a lobbyist on behalf of peace in the Middle East, specifically dealing with issues of Yemen on behalf of FCNL. And Hassan, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I love what you all are trying to accomplish here. This is great. It was great to hear everybody. Norman, I have a lot of respect for you and what you do. And I used to live with Sam Husseini, actually. So I want to talk about Yemen. There have been some major foreign policy changes happening in the past couple weeks. 2 weeks ago, the Biden administration basically started to announce that we're going to end U.S. support for offensive operations in the Saudi UAE-led war in Yemen. This is a result of tens of thousands of activists around the country led by Yemeni-Americans trying to end U.S. complicity in the world's worst humanitarian crisis on the planet that has pushed 16 million people to the brink of famine. There was a UN report just this week that said 6.5 million children are living one step away from starvation. It's absolutely horrendous. This is, the U.S. has been involved since the start of the war by supplying weapons, logistical support, intel sharing, spare parts transfers, maintenance, possibly complicity in the blockade as well, which is cutting off the flow of food, fuel, medicine, and clean water. So we've got a lot of work to do. We passed the Yemen War Powers Resolution, and the activists around the country have brought us to this point. Now we have to really look at what's happened and what we think should happen, and they haven't really clarified. So they said offensive weapons. So we really still have to push members of Congress to get answers about what does that entail? Does that include spare parts transfer? Does that include any participation in the blockade? Which weapon systems are offensive? Which will be classified as defensive? So there's an effort in Congress. I'm going to be action oriented here because I feel like there's no time to lose. Yemen can't wait. Letting your members know that you want, full end to U.S. support for the war and some pressure from your member onto the Biden administration to get these answers. We're working with Ro Khanna right now on a letter clarifying some of that, and hopefully we'll get some more info there. Now, another thing that we're trying to do is get a new UN Security Council resolution. And what happened at the beginning of the war, I guess I'm not sure. Should I? I don't want to give too much background. I feel like people here have been following the news. Seems like I don't feel like I need to start from the very beginning. But so in 2015, a UN Security Council resolution was basically pivoted and pointed right at the Houthis, and it was very unbalanced. It was totally in favor of the Hadi government. And so that's another part of the solution, I think, is to get a new UN Security Council resolution. Congress can press the U.S. ambassador to the UN to make that happen. I think that's really critical. I also think we should be pressing Congress to not just have an executive order, but to have a permanent end to U.S. military support via the NDAA and DoD approach. So I think that's going to be a fight coming up this summer. We'll be able to see that. But fcnl.org, we have lots of action links, and I encourage people to participate and let your member know that you care about the people of Yemen. Another thing we need is restore humanitarian funding to all parts of Yemen. In March of last year, at like the very start of the pandemic, when Yemen was at its most vulnerable because of the fact that all of these hospitals had been destroyed by Saudi airstrikes. We have this real opportunity here with Samantha Power to press her and make sure that she's going to do what she needs to do. She's the USAID nominee for the Biden administration. We need to press her to make sure that she follows through and restores and expands humanitarian funding, and get Saudi Arabia and the UAE to pay their fair share, because they have billions of dollars of weapons, billions of dollars of capital to spend on weapons, but only a fraction of that to spend on the humanitarian aid. So I think it's just been an honor to work with folks like Norman Solomon and so many other folks around the country. Yemeni Alliance Committee has a Yemeni woman named Jahan Hakim. And so if you have not followed her, I definitely would. I don't know how many people listening here are in the Bay Area. I assume a lot. By the way, I really miss the Bay Area. I used to live there for a long time, and I love California. So follow her work. Aisha Juman, Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation, is another really important organization doing humanitarian aid work in Yemen, and also doing amazing advocacy on the Hill and making sure that we end support for the war. Shireen Al-Ademi, I would definitely have people follow her on Twitter. She's, how much time do I have?
You got until 7:30. So
Okay, cool. So if it's all right, I'd like to talk a little bit about Iran, because I think that's another critical issue. And I appreciated what both Norman and Brett said about the sanctions. And Vahid, I appreciated what you said, and it was really touching that your family's in Iran. I have family in Jordan, and I worry about them too. And it's to have people that you love in these places that are being impacted so negatively by U.S. policy. It makes it really personal, and I think that's so important. And I will say that people that do have family in the Middle East, your voices are really needed in Capitol Hill right now because they're not being represented. I'm telling you, I'm out here, I'm in these meetings. There's not enough voices from the Middle East making these really important decisions. So I encourage you to get to know your member of Congress, get to know your senators, and get your voice heard. So the Iran nuclear deal was, an amazing accomplishment for the Middle East, in my opinion. Negotiated under the Obama administration. A lot of those same people, like Blinken, Robert Malley, Jake Sullivan, and soon to be Wendy Sherman, were really integral in the original Iran nuclear deal. So there's some really positive things that the Biden administration has said, that they want to do a compliance for compliance return. Unfortunately, the thing that I will criticize right now is that they're not moving with the urgency that's necessary to lift sanctions on Iran. Iran has said on February 21, if we do not lift sanctions on that country, that they're going to kick out the Iran nuclear inspectors. And that is a big deal that will set back our ability to advance diplomacy. And so letting your members know that you want to return to the Iran nuclear deal. Luckily, Senator Markey from Massachusetts, he's getting, and others are getting ready to introduce some legislation to, call for, restoring of diplomacy with Iran. So I think that's critical that we, build support for a return. There are some people that say on the Hill that, okay, well, we didn't like the original Iran nuclear deal. We didn't like pulling out, but we don't like getting back in. I swear to God, there are some people that are saying that, and my message is the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, the 2015 a nuclear accord that changed history between the United States and Iran, is the best place to start. Start there and then build on that for follow-on negotiations. I mean, I think it's fine to admit that we want to address the full range of issues, like, support for the Houthis, support for Hezbollah, ballistic missiles, regional terrorism. We want to have those conversations, but you got to start with the Iran nuclear deal, and that's the message for people on the Hill right now. And we have to lift sanctions. Another thing that I think we should do is do some good faith efforts as well, because we messed up pretty majorly. We slapped sanctions that have crippled Iran's economy, destroyed their oil industry, cut off the flow of medicine during a global pandemic. Iranian nurses are dying at higher rates than other nurses around the world because they don't have access to PPE, testing kits, respirators, sanitizer, the vaccine. They're starting to get some vaccine, but it's been really difficult for this country. So I think we need a worldwide temporary general license to not only support Iran, but make sure that every single country on earth can get all of this critical care. The vaccine, testing kits, PPE, respirators. I think that would be a great first step. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is also looking at a $5 billion emergency loan. I think we got to also support that to make sure that, and we can process those transactions if folks are worried about giving $5 billion to Iran, like, the crates of cash. If they're worried about that, let's process it through Instex or the Swiss channel that was set up to do transactions. Anyway, I think we've got a lot of work to do. I want everyone to stay engaged on this, and you already are. It's been such a pleasure, and I looking forward to hearing everybody else.
Thank you so much, Hassan. Greatly appreciate your comments and your views and the work that you do on a daily basis. Besides your activism, you are one hell of a musician. So if you want to hear a song from Hassan and his performance, please watch our previous event. He was kind enough to play a few songs for us from American Nomad, and we were so glad to have him. So hope we continue to hear from you. Our next speaker is a gentleman that I met, my fellow Iranian that is part of the Commissioner of San Francisco Immigrant Rights, Nima Rahimi. Nima, he worked on the travel ban against Muslims. He's worked against ICE detention centers, protecting DACA. So he's done some amazing work, and I wanted to get his perspective. So please, Nima.
Thank you, Vahid John. Let me start by, Hassan, thank you for all your work you're doing on behalf of the Yemeni people and the Yemeni diaspora. We have many Yemeni immigrants in San Francisco who I've had the fortune of meeting through my work as an immigrant rights commissioner. One issue that came out of the Civil War were, folks were trying to send money home to help their families buy food, buy medicine. I mean, as little as $50 a month, $100 a month could support multiple families, but they weren't able to get their money across because of the banking system. They would have to use Western Union or other payment systems, and they would hold their money without explanation due to onerous regulations that were promoted by the Trump administration, and people were suffering and dying. And I'm hopeful that this administration will move swiftly to right the wrongs of that war. Again, with these kinds of situations, it's the people that suffer because the politicians want to test their weapons or to project power for reasons that sometimes don't make any sense to me. So Hassan, thank you for your work. So just to give you a quick little background of myself, I was born in Berkeley, California, actually, to Iranian-American parents. They came here to the United States in the 70s. To go to school. And back then with the Shah, there were a lot of cross-cultural programs. A lot of Iranians would come to the United States, get an education, higher education. They would go back to Iran to improve their stock in life, get a good job. My parents, they grew up in poor villages in Iran, and big families, and they hustled. They worked hard, and they got themselves into programs in the United States. And they were going to go back. They were going to go back and get good jobs and help their families out of poverty. That was the plan. But unfortunately, you plan and God laughs, right? The revolution happened, and then the Iraq War started, and they instead of going back home, they had to pivot and figure out how to make a life here in America, and use their few quarters that they had. Split between their meals, their education costs, and their laundry to be able to call home and get a few minutes. They would have to call like a neighbor who had a telephone, and not everybody had a telephone back then. And they'd get news of the latest bombing, how their family was doing, who was alive, who was not. So I can't imagine going through that. I feel so lucky and privileged to be born in the Bay Area. And to be able to do the work that I do because of their sacrifices. And then that's kind of, I went through a little identity process when I was in high school, because I was a sophomore in high school when 9/11 happened. And I didn't really understand what was going on. The distinction between Saudi Arabia, other Arab countries, Iran, why people were calling me a terrorist. I didn't understand. So when I got to college, I went to Cal. I went to Berkeley across the bay to go to undergrad. I went through this entire, I focused all of my studies on understanding my identity. Who am I? Am I Iranian? Am I American? What does that mean? And ultimately, I did a lot of reading and studying on the history of the Middle East, how it became what it is today, why the conflicts are what they are today. I went and got a master's degree in global politics so I could understand the history, the international relations of the Middle East, and why these conflicts have persisted for so many decades, and what the root of that was. And ultimately, again, the people get screwed over for people who want power. That's what it all comes down to. And I mean, of course, it's a simplification of the complex and nuances of the history, but that's what it came back to. So when I went to law school, took on a bunch of debt that I'll have to pay off for the next 25 years, and became a lawyer. And so my day job keeps me busy. I can't do the humanitarian work that I'd love to do as a day job. But what I do in my spare time is I'm on the Immigrant Rights Commission here in San Francisco. I'm a delegate to the State Democratic Party. And I've been advocating against war and on behalf of human rights to the extent that I can. And that's why I had great hope when Obama became president, and he actually pursued detente and engagement with Iran. As Vahid mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, the Iranian regime isn't, they're not the beacon of peace. They're not the beacon of human rights. But at the end of the day, international relations isn't always about that. It's about finding a path that you can reach an ultimate amount of peace at some point in the future. And I thought Obama's engagement was historic, despite the odds. And it gave me hope that with an educated, strong middle class in Iran, very smart, very educated, a lot of potential in the country, engagement and integration with the world economy would result over time to democracy. You can call me an idealist, you can call me naive, but I think historically engagement with the outside world, economic interdependence, often results in the end of authoritarianism. Not always, but often. And I think Iran is a prime country where if you engage and you integrate the country with the Western world, you'll find that the people will push for that freedom because they've tasted a bit of it before. And so I had a lot of hope. And so when Donald Trump got elected, and he started to actually follow through on all the crap that he said during the election, it was devastating. But we you can't just sit there and take it, right? So we were at the airports the day after the announcement came of the travel ban. We gathered organizations, community organizations, Iranian-American organizations, lawyers, activists. We went to the airport to shut the airport down. We helped folks that were arriving. I mean, we literally put a Google Doc together that we sent around in social media to families so they could tell us who their relatives were that were arriving at the airport. So we can literally text them as they landed and let them know, you have a lawyer on the other side. Don't sign anything that's going to give away your rights. We had no idea what was going on. We were literally improvising. Trump set us back. And I'm looking at the situation right now with the nuclear deal. And, I think there's a lot going on in the background that we just don't know about, right? As there always is. The leaders are posturing. The Iranians have an election coming up soon that could change the balance of power in the politics domestically. You have a very old supreme leader. There could be a transition of power in the middle of all this. When Soleimani got assassinated last year, I wrote an article in the Chronicle actually about it because I was afraid. I was like, look, that was a red line cross, right? Like in their politics behind the scenes in the proxy battles, the U.S. and Iran have had certain red lines they don't cross. I thought that one was a red line. And I think articles that were written about the assassination after the fact also indicated that was a red line. And Iran's retaliation was a bit soft, right? They had to do something. They did something. It wasn't really that much, and it caused a lot of fanfare. But I don't see the hardliners in that country letting that one go. I do worry, and I wrote about this, that they're going to retaliate in some way that's going to be significant, at least for them. And what are the consequences of that going to be? And what is that going to look like? It could happen years from now. It could happen, on foreign soil. I don't know. But the Trump administration set us back. It wasn't just getting out of the JCPOA, the sanctions, the way they've isolated the country even further during a pandemic, the suffering that people have felt. There's a lot of loss of trust, right? And so how do you repair that? How does Biden do that? And I view this from an American lens. So that identity process that I was telling you about, at the end of the day, I said, no, I'm Iranian-American. America is a melting pot. America stands for values. It's not about your nationality. It's not about where your parents came from. It's the value system that this country stands for and that we all, as citizens, will embody, hopefully. It's not always like that, though, right? And you look at our history, it's not always like that. But we got to keep fighting the good fight because, the arc of history bends towards justice, hopefully, right? And I believe that. I feel like over time, we're getting there. And it takes people like us moving that needle towards that arc. So, I'm up on time here. But look, I think Biden's a good guy. I think he's going to be one of the most impactful presidents in U.S. history. particularly because he's a white male and he'll be able to have a lot more, he'll be able to accomplish more than maybe his predecessors did. But I think ultimately, I think he's going to be a very impactful president. I think there will be a deal with Iran. And I do think that Iran will be a democracy one day. And the relationship between the two countries will be positive again. That is my hope, and it's my belief, but I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take some time.
I hope it happens, Nima. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for all the great work that you do on behalf of immigrants, on behalf of people that are coming to this country as refugees from abroad, and as well as the work that you did around the Muslim ban and DACA and abolishing ICE. And there's a lot more there to talk about in future events. So thank you so much, Nima Jan.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. Our next speaker doesn't require an introduction. Reese Ehrlich, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Reese is a professor of international studies at University of San Francisco. He's been a freelance journalist for PRI, CBC, Progressive, Vice News, published 5 books. So Reese, you have the stage, sir.
Well, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening. I'll take you back to the year of 2015. I was interviewing a diplomat in Tehran, an Iranian diplomat, and as is the norm these days, he was scrolling through his phone while we were talking, and he came across an article. He says, "Reese, your book is being published here in Tehran. You're famous." And I hadn't got the foggiest idea what he was talking about. And I later figured it out that back in 2005, when Norman and I and Sean Penn all visited Iran, we met this young journalist who wanted to translate our book, Target Iraq, which had just come out in 2003. He wanted to translate it to Farsi and get it published in Iran. And he wanted our permission. We said, sure. We knew we weren't going to get any money for it, but we thought it would be nice to have a Farsi edition. But that's the last we heard of it. Fast forward 10 years later, this translator gets me on the phone. He says, "Reese, we finally got your book published 10 years later. And I didn't know you were in Iran, but since you're here, I want to hold a press conference." So I said, fine. What do I know? So we go to a press conference. It's a huge deal. There's like every wire service in Iran, every TV station, the culture editor of the main TV show, the nightly news show, everybody is there. And they wanted, and I couldn't figure out, this book is, is old by now. Target Iraq was written in 2003. It turns out that the timing was perfect because we were very critical of US policy in Iraq, in the Iraq War. And there was part of the debate going on between the reformists and the hardliners in Iran as to how much you could trust the US. And I'll never forget a question that was asked to me by one of the journalists at the press conference. And he said, what if after Biden, let's say we signed the agreement, this is the period before the JCPOA had been finalized. What if the next president comes along and gets out of the agreement? I said, well, how that's not very likely. But if it does happen, there'll be a huge amount of international pressure from Europe and elsewhere to rejoin and to go along with the agreement. And so we had some back and forth, and it turns out this guy was a reporter for one of the hardline newspapers. The hardliners, by the way, are called principalists in Iran because they say they uphold the principles of the Iranian Revolution. But, something looking back on that conversation so many years back, they had a point. Why should the Iranian people trust the United States? I mean, in the United States, of course, it's always the other way around. Oh, these evil Iranians, they lie, they cheat, they take hostages, blah, 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 blah. But the reality, if you look at the reality on the ground, it was the US that pulled out of the agreement. And it was the US that imposed horrific sanctions, as Vahid and others have talked about tonight. I won't go into details. So the situation is, if we fast forward to the situation today, the Majlis, the parliament in Iran, has passed a resolution last December saying that if the US doesn't lift all sanctions by February 21st, it will block IAEA inspectors from coming into the country. Hassan mentioned that. I won't go into details. Also, just this week, one of the hardliner minister of what is he called? He's called the Minister of the Intelligence. He threatened Mahmoud Alavi. He raised the possibility that the country would seek nuclear weapons if the US didn't restore normal relations and rejoin the JCPOA. Now, some of this is posturing. They're getting ready for negotiations. They know there's people in the US who don't want to rejoin the JCPOA. But, and this is the way they have of putting some pressure on the US to say, look, get serious or you're going to be in trouble. And it has some impact. It has some impact. But whether, in fact, I don't think the Iranian government, and particularly Ayatollah Khamenei, has made it clear for many years that Iran does not seek a nuclear weapon. I don't actually think that's going to change. But everything short of that is up for grabs, is up for negotiations. Iran is not the only country with hardliners. The United States has hardliners. We have people in Congress and in the Biden administration who are convinced, well, you know, the JCPOA was a good thing. And it was wrong for Trump to pull out. But as long as this is the new reality, why can't we try and get some more? And they start throwing up issues like the missiles, the conventional missiles that Iran has. That issue was already settled back in 2015. Iran has the right to develop its own conventional weapons, including missiles. But the US doesn't like that because they know it gives a big defensive capability to Iran, and they say it, you know, threatens Israel. They say, well, we have to raise human rights issues and include that in the negotiations. And I would say, well, sure, if you want to raise all of Iran's very real human rights violations inside this country, then the US has to commit to a discussion of stopping murders of young African-American men and women in the streets of your cities. That's a massive human rights violation. Well, of course, the United States is never going to negotiate something like that. In fact, we'd be outraged. How can we possibly agree? That's an internal matter. We're making progress. Things are getting better, you know. And meanwhile, of course, why shouldn't, if the U.S. can't continually harps on Iran's human rights violations, why shouldn't Iran have the right to do the same? So you see where you get into a can of worms with this. What the U.S. should be doing is proceeding to rejoin the JCPOA as quickly as possible, settle that issue, and then move on to whatever other discussions both sides want to agree to. And it could happen. I'll give you one possible scenario. The U.S. already claims that it allows food and medicine as an exception to all the various sanctions the U.S. has imposed over the years. Well, in fact, it hasn't. I've written for Vice News and others how it's very hard to find certain drugs because the European and Swiss drug companies don't want to ship anything to Iran, fearing sanctions through the US banking system and so on. So even cancer drugs or diabetes drugs are very difficult to get. And there's even a street in Tehran where you go to buy illicit drugs that have been smuggled in from across the border from Turkey or from Kurdistan or elsewhere. You buy it, either you find out if it's available and you buy it at very high prices, if in fact it's even available. So the US could start the ball rolling by going to these Swiss pharmaceutical companies and others and saying, we will guarantee that if you sell the following drugs to Iran, not give, but sell, we will guarantee that there will be no sanctions against you, as an offer of good faith, and to follow through on that. The Iranians could respond by lowering the amount of uranium they're enriching or lowering the level to which it's being refined. And there's lots of incremental steps that could be taken. The US could then lift other kinds of sanctions, say the oil embargo, and the Iranians could respond. So there's lots of ways that step by step, the differences and the distrust could be overcome, and both sides could reach an agreement. And then there's plenty of issues that could be resolved at a later time once that's been done. And one of those issues might be someday Norman and I getting paid for the book that we had published in Tehran. Thank you all very much, folks.
Thank you so much, Reese. Good luck with that, getting paid. I don't think the currency's got that much value these days, thanks to these sanctions. Unfortunately, Iranians have truly suffered under Trump's maximum pressure. Maximum pressure didn't work in Cuba for 60 years. It didn't work for Venezuela. And it's not going to work against a country as proud as Iran and Iranians are. Now we get to the discussion portion of it. I want to open it up to the people that spoke. So if you could kindly unmute yourself or give me one quick second to do that. Wonderful. And so one thing I wanted to start off with was the whole idea of nuclear technology and the need for nuclear reactors in the Middle East. UAE is developing an agreement with South Korea to build 4 nuclear reactors in UAE. As you know, the Japanese government is pretty much shutting down its nuclear technology for producing energy. The Germans are doing the same and are moving to solar and wind and other sources, as well as natural gas. So why do we have a need in the Middle East, in such a hot conflict, to have nuclear technology by countries like UAE and Iran and the rest? And I'll put that to the panel of speakers.
Well, I can start with a quick comment. I know Norman and I are very strong opponents of nuclear power in the United States or anywhere else. But as long as the US and others use nuclear power, the Iranians have, in my view, every right to develop it as well. And if you go back to the 1960s, when the Shah was in power, there was many reports needed nuclear energy as an alternative. And in fact, the US was prepared, the Europeans and the US, to sell Iran 10 nuclear reactors to generate power. And of course, that all ended in 1979 with the revolution. But you have to have one yardstick. If it's okay for the US to have nuclear power, then it's okay for Iran to have it. If I was Iranian, I would be out in the streets demonstrating against nuclear power and in favor of wind and solar and other alternatives. But that's an issue for the Iranian people to decide, not for the United States.
Yeah, something I would add on that is that when Reese and I were in Tehran, and so this was maybe 15 years ago, and Reese and Sean would tease me justifiably because I had one question that I kept asking the men and women in the street over all others. I would ask everybody I talked to who could speak English or who was with me with a translator, and that is, do you support nuclear power in Iran? And I must have asked 50 people at least. And I think I found one who said no. And 98% or so said, yes, I definitely support nuclear power for Iran. And it was overwhelmingly, the reason was what Reese just described. Well, you have it in the United States, the Western Europe countries have it. You think we're not good enough?
Nima, go ahead.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think the Iranian people, they know their history, right? They know what happened with Mossadegh. They understand how foreign countries have meddled in their integrity for decades. But even more so, they remember the Iraq War. Saddam was the aggressor. He invaded. And when Iran went to the United Nations, because that's what that institution was designed to prevent or at least stop, the United Nations didn't do anything.
Nima,
and in fact,
Nima, you should adjust your computer. You're off center.
Can you hear me now?
No, but it's the video.
I'm off center.
There you go. A little more.
There we go. Okay.
I think it's looking great, personally.
Thank you. I'm in cash chic for COVID. So I think when Iran went to the United Nations to get help, and when the United Nations didn't actually stop the war, and in fact, countries that are part of the Security Council started funding or at least providing weapons to Saddam, Iran had a choice to make. And so I think the Iranian people, lost a million lives in that war or something close to that. I think 1.5 million died in that war total, mostly Iranians. When your territorial integrity has been attacked in such a violent way, and you were at risk of losing, which they were, the nuclear weapon becomes the real solution to prevent it in the future, right? It's the ultimate deterrent. If the world institutions that were designed after World War II to maintain peace fail, what are you going to do as a nation state? It doesn't matter if it's Iran. You can give me any country. Israel has nuclear weapons for reasons that make logical sense in the formulas of international relations. When your people have been targeted to extermination, right? When you look at the Holocaust, it makes logical sense. You're gonna hold the weapon that's gonna prevent that from happening again. And so Iran, it makes logical sense. If the institutions aren't going to protect you, if the countries with nuclear weapons aren't going to protect you, you're gonna get a nuclear weapon. And the way the Germans and the Japanese have gotten around it post World War II is they have breakout capability. If they need to make a nuclear one, they've got all the tools to do it. Nobody ever talks about that. They have their nuclear deterrent. It's just not put together. And so I've talked about writing a book or writing a movie script where an alien race invades, and they're not hostile. They just put a gun to our heads to resolve our differences and come to peace. And I bet you if that happened, we'd find a way to resolve this shit. So maybe if someone wants to collaborate on that story, I'm game. But sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Nima.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Brett, you had a comment as well?
Yeah, let me just put my hand down here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, and to build on that, when we talk about meddling, a lot of the times people who are in the know, they talk about past events like the 1953, Operation Ajax and all that. But sometimes people forget it's ongoing. I mean, it's like going beyond like John McCain singing "Bomb, Bomb, Bomb Iran" and every single successive administration threatening Iran at one time or another. You have support for like groups like the MEK, the Mujahideen al-Kek, who are trained in Nevada and with bipartisan, support from Rudy Giuliani and I forget who the Democrats who backed them, and then you have these the cyber attacks and the assassination of the nuclear scientists and just all these things. And as Reese was saying before, it's portrayed in the United States, like the history starts in 1979 with the embassy takeover, and in reality that was the reaction to a quarter century or more of Western, meddling and ongoing, and that just seems to get ignored. To what Norm was speaking, it just seems to get ignored in the narrative, and so it does seem only natural that there's a point of pride and of a people who an ancient people to and even with all that in mind, that they are not developing, the fact that they're not actually developing nuclear weapons is actually maybe more astonishing, given all the constant, incessant hostility toward them.
So, thank you, Brett. So Iran and U.S. are in a standoff right now as to who's going to make the first move. If it's going to be Joe Biden or Iran first, what do you think is going to happen? Who's going to go first? And how will that affect Iranian election coming up in a few months?
Vahid, mind if I answer one thing on the UAE? Is the question now? I think we got to zoom out a little bit. Israel used, during the Cold War, they were very useful to the United States, and that was sort of a big pretense for our relationship. After the Cold War, Israel needed a new enemy, and Iran became that enemy, became the boogeyman. And you see things like the Abraham Accords, where now the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, countries that were not at war, and we're not at war, working together to oppose Iran, are now creating this new bloc in the Middle East, and made even more permanent with these massive weapons deals, not just nuclear. There was a $23 billion weapons deal to the UAE in the lame duck of the Trump administration, with PGMs, precision guided munitions, Reaper drones, and F-35s. Massive amounts of weaponry. And that's, okay, we gave them the Abraham Accords, they normalized with Israel, and a lot of members feel like they owe the UAE something, even though that they're perpetuating so much violence and death in Yemen. Even though they're breaking a UN arms embargo in Libya to transfer, U.S.-made weapons to warlords that are committing war crimes. So we have to, we have to really think about these relationships that these countries have, and we have to ask ourselves in the U.S., is leading the Middle East really the best thing for our national security? Like, is perpetually being pushed into more war, more conflict, is that benefiting Americans? I'd say hell no. And what we really need to do is restore diplomacy with Iran and try to, off-ramp a little bit on this toxic relationship with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be harder with the UAE. I'm telling you, that's a tough nut to crack, because folks folks in Congress and even the Biden administration, they praise this Abraham Accord. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Yeah, I'd add, I think Hassan's making a key point, and the praise of this Abraham Accord is sort of in the tradition of the peace process, the peace process that never existed really as a peace process, but now we're hearing that the Abraham Accord is a peace effort, and so on and so forth. I'm really struck by that 30 years ago or more, 40 years ago, the US media paradigm and the politics from Washington was rhetorically, was Israel surrounded by hostile Arabs. And that's really shifted now. It's like the good Arab countries that are friendly with Israel, or maybe do a little bit of rhetoric against Israel, or cry crocodile tears about Palestinians, but then they're actually supremely aligned with Israel, like Saudi Arabia, and they're united by hostility towards Iran. And so the whole it's very hard to keep track of the moving parts, because the parts have been moving so much, and certainly US news media don't usually do much to clarify in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Norman. So who's going to make the first move between Iran and US in regards to bringing down the temperature? What's going to happen there? Reese, what's your view?
Well, I think the US should be the one to bring down the temperature. And is certainly capable of doing that. I outlined one possible direction, but I think that the Biden administration has to decide: is it committed to returning to the JCPOA as written, or is it going to try to insert new issues that either had already been discussed or already been rejected into the conversation? Once the U.S. makes that decision, then it will be much easier to proceed. All these tactical issues of who does what, who makes the first concessions, all that can be dealt with. These are very sophisticated diplomats. Is the US willing to go back to what it had originally agreed to, or is it going to attempt to stick other issues in and anger the Iranians, who could very easily walk away?
Yeah, I mean, what faith do the Iranian government has that in 4 years, when a new administration comes in, will not renege on its deal again? Nima.
What I was going to say is, I think the Iranian regime was trying to wait out Trump, right? So they were waiting for him to leave so that they could re-engage with the United States. And if I look at past history and how the United States and Iran have conducted their diplomacy, there's a lot of back channeling, right? And I would bet that since the Biden administration has taken power and they've identified their negotiating leaders, I would be willing to bet, and we'll probably read about this 3 months, 6 months from now, maybe next year. There's some back channeling happening. Conversations are being had to set up what it would look like to come back to it. I think what we're seeing in the media is posturing, things that need to happen, signals that are being sent, sure. But I think back channels, which have existed before, are being reopened and conversations are being had. So I'm optimistic that we're going to see a deal. It might be a little different than what we had before, but I'm optimistic.
Hassan, I'm going to combine it with one question and give you the final word from one of the audiences on YouTube. They're asking about potential IMF loans to Iran and what kind of conditions they would have in terms of getting financial aid from the World Bank and IMFs of the world and being able to recover their economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I could just answer that one first. We saw, we are seeing some movement in the Biden administration. They just issued that they're going to do a sanctions review, not just on Iran, but all over. I think that signals that they are rethinking sanctions. We need more pressure there. Rep. Ilhan Omar has some great legislation. I urge people to support her Pathways for Peace to, look at how we, use sanctions more broadly. The IMF loan, that's, early in the early stages. It hasn't been approved, but it's being considered right now. That to me is probably a sign that the Biden administration is giving a wink and a nod to the IMF, saying that they, wouldn't oppose that. So I wanted to give people a little practical advice on 3 members who let's say 6 members that I think 6 senators that could really shape this conversation. Senator Menendez in New Jersey, he needs so much pressure right now. That is the guy. He's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's let's use the maximum pressure as leverage to get a better deal, aka the Trump plan was really cool. Let's keep doing it. Cruel plan. He needs to be pushed. Senator Cardin, Senator Coons. Coons is really close to Biden. He's Delaware. The peace movement is super weak. Out Delaware. I'm sorry. It needs love. It needs a little bit of love. If you know anybody from Delaware, get them activated. Senator Cardin from Maryland. He's the number 2 Senate Foreign Relations person. I'm close by there. I can do a little work there. Senator Schumer. I think Senator Schumer's interesting. He's moved quite a bit, and he now, is saying that he supports the Iran nuclear deal. I think we could push him. If we can get him to say the Iran nuclear deal is good for Israel's national security or something, I think that would be, really powerful. I think he's on the fence there. We could push him. And then 2 others is Arizona Senators Sinema and Kelly. They are like the frontline Democrats of the Senate. And if, they just voted to arm the UAE in December. And so they need some pressure too. So I would just leave people with that. I think it's time to double down, get engaged. This isn't going to happen on its own. We need to really just keep pushing.
Great. Thank you all. I really appreciate the time you spent with us today. We're going to have a quick video. And after that, we move to Debbie Durst and some comedy. So please stick around.
Hi, I'm Vahid Razavi with Ethics and Technology. For the past 8 years, we've been focused on ethical use of technology in various sectors, from AI, security, privacy. We've covered it all with our events and our blog. Today, I'm asking you to kindly consider making a tax-deductible donation to Ethics and Tech for turning the tables on the tech sector. As you're well aware, there's a lot of injustice that happens within the tech community, from the gig economy and its underpaid workers to employees such as myself that worked for Amazon and Jeff Bezos that were mistreated while I was there. And as long as we don't speak up, nothing will change. If we don't share what's happening, nothing will become of it and nothing will improve. So we want to turn the table. We want to create an app that targets tech community in corporate America and evaluates it based on how ethical and just they are, not just how great they are for their consumers. So with your help, we're hoping to raise some capital in order to do this. It's not a lot of money, and we can definitely build the app, and we have the experience to do it. We also want to be able to continue to fund our community of comedians, writers, bloggers that contribute content to our various events. With your help, we can do that. In return for your generous contribution, what we are willing to offer is annual memberships in ethics and tech that include events, online events, as well as in-person events once we can have them again, as well as access to our applications once it's developed, and of course our blog that's always free and does not serve any ads, and we don't plan to serve any ads on. So we hope you can join us. We hope that we can turn some of the injustice against the employees of these tech companies and be able to make a difference with your help. Thank you.
Dating in the Bay Area is so overrated.
Tucker.
Can online dating profiles be any more lame? Looking for an attractive woman to sweep off her feet. This one even listed married in his profile. I'm a nerd. I like music, creativity, and children, especially the hardworking kind. Seriously? ISO for intelligent, capable woman not to hire. Yep, please don't come looking for me. Wait, what? Seriously? I'm a busy online marketplace with many interests. I bet you are. I bet he even lives at home with his mother. I am an easygoing social networking app. Do girls actually fall for this? I think I will be single for the rest of my life. Wait, hold the door. I haven't seen you here before. Good looking, great personality, and not creepy? I'll swipe to that.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. It's great to be here this evening. I always learn so much when I involve myself in these ethics and tech things, and tonight was very interesting. Uh, it's fabulous. First of all, I want to say that Mr. Will Durst says hello to everyone. He's okay. He's getting a little better. It's slower than molasses and watching grass grow, but there is progress, and that's a good thing. I also want to tell everybody that this is really me. I am not a cat. I am. That this is really me. I'd like to also let you know that we have two very fine comedians that this evening. I enjoy watching both of these women. They're fabulous. Your first comedian this evening, if this were not a pandemic, she would be traveling up and down the West Coast from Seattle to San Diego and parts unknown, delighting audiences with her comedic complaints. But lately, yeah, she's resorted to hiding from her kids in the closet, hoping to be just left alone as she screams into the void that is Zoom comedy. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud and happy to present to you Jeanette Marin.
Hello, thank you, Debbie. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Welcome to my day 334 of my Bay Area lockdown. I today on day 334 finally understood why I am considered non-essential. You guys convinced me. Listening to you guys talk made me have to Google a few words. Um, I'm glad you guys are doing all the discussion, because for me, I would have said, what are my hopes and dreams for Biden administration? Just set the bar real low. Just don't be Trump, right? Just don't have murder and heartache and deportation at every, just real. It's like how I do my New Year's resolution. Like my New Year's resolution this year was just drink water. Just put the basic needs of your body into your mouth. Just the basic, that's me. So you guys with your, oh, I in my free time solve world peace. Oh, that's great. I in my free time do the dishes. So I'm gonna stick to me. Um, yeah, I've learned a lot from you guys, mostly because I Googled words in your bios. I didn't know what adjunct professor was. It's just a fancy word for part-time. That's all that is. I'm learning. I am here day 334 with my kids who are ages 11, 10, 7, and 5. Yeah, oof is usually the response I get, Brett. That's usually what people say. So let's just celebrate you're not me, huh? Let's. It's true. Celebrate the little things in life. That's what I was told when I had kids. Celebrate the little things. They don't tell you it's because you get no more big things. I now celebrate all big things, little things alike. Like I brushed my teeth and took a shower today. Shot, right? I celebrate that if I no longer go outside, I no longer have to fear a DUI. My children are fine and loved. I have to legally say that once a show. I'm not okay. I'm not okay. I know I'm not okay because my targeted ads, I know Big Brother's your next subject, but my targeted ads have changed to things like this. Would you like booze delivered to your door? Did you know that you could just get booze delivered to your door? I've ordered all of these. I am now a certified bartender. I have all the accoutrements. I didn't know that you could do this, but my targeted ads, this was just one day on Facebook. Did you know you could get a whiskey barrel? I have two. This was just one day of Facebook, which is why I know that social media, they get me. Okay, they're like, hey, mama, do you need alcohol? Yes, I do. Better than what my social media targeted ads used to be, which was just stop yelling at your kids. How to not have that child and then create this child. Eek, right? So my kids are fine. They are. I know we were talking about religion earlier. I was a bad Catholic. I believed in birth control. Birth control stopped believing in me. We could have named our kids, oops, uh-oh, what the hell, and are you kidding me back here? A lot of people say, oh, why didn't you just have an IUD? My IUD is now named Olivia. There she is. She never stops talking. I think it was the copper. It wound her up. I'm going to just something soothing because the kids give me anxiety. I don't, the noise level alone, it's psychological warfare. Like, just mama, but I'm winning. Okay, because every once in a while I put them all in the car and then I stop short and knock the wind out of them. After the gasp, there's that second of silence. Like, that is a win for me, people. Thank you. No, I'm fine because a mom taught me that you can give your children melatonin gummies. Have you heard of these? The melatonin helps you sleep, Debbie. It's so great. And plus, you know, they have vegetables. So my kids are getting their daily allotment of vegetables every day by noon. Fine. No, they're fine and loved. I legally said that, right? Okay. I don't think I'm surviving this pandemic as much as I'm surviving a hostage situation. Think about it. They let their dad leave every day because we've explained he's going to go get the money. Right? Meanwhile, I spend my life saying things like, I'm not going anywhere. Can I please just pee by myself? No. The answer's always no. A lot of people in this pandemic are saying, oh, I miss people. I don't have that problem. I made too many people. Don't miss them. Now my kids, they have to do their Zoom and everything, and their schooling, their karate, their band, their drama, their coding, all of it's in my living room. Now I have to clean up and they have to be on time. No, pick one. Stop being selfish. My 5th grader this year, we learned she has to learn human anatomy and development. Uh-oh. They sent home a packet for us parents to teach them. I'll be honest, I learned a lot from the packet. But these kids in 5 years, when they're graduating high school, a lot of them gonna be pregnant. Because either their parents aren't teaching them or they're teaching them too much. Some kids don't need to know that. Let them learn like a Jedi. I think it's harder for parents to teach their kids about this than teachers because, hear me out, all right? I know teachers work hard, but teachers don't have to put a condom on a banana and then serve up that banana with some peanut butter for lunch. Okay. Traumatizing. Okay. People piss me off. They say things like, I don't know how you're doing it. I'm not doing it. My 5-year-old thinks there's something called daytime pajamas. I found out my 9-year-old doesn't know our address. Okay. She knows every word to every Taylor Swift song, but if she gets lost, she belongs to the world now. I'm not doing it. My kids are fine though. I'm trying to make them into nerds. I read them all Harry Potter. I put them all in band. Not the cool instruments either, wind instruments. I'm trying to induce asthma. Right? But the only thing you don't want as a parent is a bully, right? I was bullied in junior high because I was raised half Catholic, you know, half Italian and half Mexican, all Catholic. But to the Mexican girls in school, it didn't count if you don't speak of the Spanish. I didn't know. I didn't know if they were saying they had beat me up or they were gonna beat me up. Conjugation is hard, people. But I righted that wrong. I put my kids in Spanish immersion school. Now they are fluent in Spanish. Great. Except now they're in the car talking shit about me in Spanish. I don't know if they're saying we're going home or they're going to put me in a home. Then I just stopped short and knocked the wind out of them, huh? All right, I want to say thank you to the Ethics in Tech, mostly, well, I mean, for having me, but also because you already sent the check. Celebrate the little things, people. That's my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeanette. You are so funny. Oh man, and good luck. We're all counting on you. Not 1, not 2, but 4. Good grief. And if anything, you know, it keeps you on your toes, and good Lord, you've maintained your sense of humor, and that in itself is a job well done. Thanks. Our next comedian I have known forever. She's fabulous. She's almost a neighbor. She's in the neighborhood. I could almost hang out my window and wave hi to her, except it's raining and I would get cold. So she's trying to get used to the new normal and just approach it with a variation of the Special Olympics mantra saying, Lord, let me be funny. And if I am not funny, at least let me be brave in the attempt. My good friend, Andre the Wonder Woman.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I had no idea this was going to be such an educational night. And I have to say, after listening to this presentation, I can see why you need comedy. And I want to say I really like it because it's way better than doing comedy after a strip show, okay? I mean, people are angry, you got old ladies chasing the men around the venue, so this is much better, okay? And I actually learned a lot of great things. I have to give a shout out to Nima because he gave me some stuff I'm going to use for the rest of my life. Like, you plan, God laughs. I love that. I can use that in virtually every situation that I'm in. And I agree with him. He's lucky to be born in Berkeley as opposed to Podunk, Kansas, because they would have given him a really hard time out there. But I want to tell you that I've been doing comedy a long time and I would have been famous by now, but I got to work. You know what I'm saying? And I'm trying to get used to the whole Zoom thing. I'm kind of what you call a technosaur. You know, I didn't grow up with technology, but I was born just on the cusp where you have to learn it. And so it's kind of a trauma a bit. And I think tech is cool. I really do, but I like to remind techies, you know, without electricity, you ain't shit, you know? and I just like to let them know. And tech is good, but I have to tell you that sometimes tech goes too far, people. You know, one of my particular pet peeves, these public toilets that flush on their own. I don't like that, people. I mean, some of these toilets flush before you sit down. I'm like, what are they doing? Taking my picture? Don't flush before I'm ready because I want to see the crap I do, you know? I have to report something to my doctor. And I'm adjusting, you know, I wear the mask. I hate the mask. I never did think that was going to work out well for Black people wearing the mask. That's just, and I'm trying to live with the whole COVID scare. I got my own test for COVID-19, and that is to eat 24/7 to make sure I still have my taste and smell. And I'm so happy that I don't have kids. Jeanette, I'm with you all the way. Because I tell you, if I had to homeschool my kids, I would have to sit them down and tell them, you're going to be held back. And I have to say, while we are speaking of presidential priorities, I'm all for that. I thought this was just the most fascinating discussion. I'm so happy you recorded it so I can go back and listen again. But I have a presidential priority that I would like to put forward, and that is that I think we should have a national initiative requiring all white people to get a college education. Because it's bad enough when they go to Harvard and Yale, but when they don't go to college at all, it's bad for America, okay? That's all I gotta say. And you know, I'm so amazed, like listening to all this stuff about the melee at the Capitol and that sort of, all that craziness. I think they gave these people too much credit, calling them insurrectionists and saying it was a coup. I mean, have you seen these people? You want to be under a government led by Antler Guy? I mean, really, it's just, and I mean, these are, you know, like everybody says, oh, don't speak ill of the people on the right. They're not stupid. They're just mad. I'm like, okay, they might be mad, but they're a little stupid too. All right. Because I mean, really, QAnon, I mean, come on, people. How are you gonna think Donald Trump is gonna save you from the pedophiles when he's a pedophile himself? I mean, Jesus. And you know, I just think, like, who has time? You know, I think they give them too much credit. Like, you know, these people, they didn't strike me as smart enough to know that the P in coup is silent. Okay. Like, we're gonna go up to DC and do a coup. We're gonna do the coup right now. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I'm always amazed. Like, I just can't figure out who has time for hate. I just don't have. It's time consuming. Okay, think about it. You got to go out, you got to buy the sheets, you got to cut the eyes in the sheets for holes so you can see. You know, you got people, you know, who are not that bright, spelling nigga with 1 G. I mean, come on, people. These are not the smartest people that you ever want to be around. And you know these people are not working. You know they couldn't be working. Who has time to paint themselves up and put on antlers? It's just like an arsonist. You know that an arsonist does not have a job because you cannot go to work the next day smelling of smoke and accelerant. They know it's you. So I just think people should just calm down. I'm just trying to get with the whole COVID mask. You know we're gonna be wearing these masks forever. I'm thinking of having mine just surgically implanted because what's the point? I get sick of the damn mask, okay? And how the hell can you be cool when your glasses are always fogging up? That's kind of a drag. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that humans really haven't learned very much. Like when this whole thing hit, I'm thinking, whose idea was it to open up the bars first? I mean, really? Come on now. What that is going to be, the mask is coming off, the clothes, that's going to be a super spreader event all day long, okay? That's all I got to say. So I don't know what it is with the humans. We just can't seem to get our act together. One of the things I'm always amazed about human beings is us going to outer space. I mean, I think that's the height of human arrogance, don't you? Think about it. Who do you think wants to be associated with us? We can't feed our children. We're destroying the environment, judging people based on their color, how much money they got, what their religion is. Don't nobody want your ass on Venus. You know, the reason why you can't find intelligent life on other planets because they are intelligent enough to hide out from us when we come through. So I don't know, man. It's kind of a crazy world, but man, this has been such a great event. I'm definitely gonna tune in. I told my friends to check it out, so I hope I have some audience members out there. But I really did learn a lot, and I think it's so helpful to get this kind of insight from people who know, because the media doesn't always give you the full picture. And I think the one thread that wove through this entire event was that when we know each other, we have a much better opportunity for peace. And I'm very hopeful about the new administration, even though I don't even know what to say about those people up in the Capitol. You know, I said as my New Year's resolution, I was gonna stop using the phrase white people so cavalierly in my act, because I know not all white people are the same. So now when I want to talk about white people behaving badly, I just call them Republicans. It's easier. So thank you guys so much for inviting me. Thank you for educating me. I was so impressed with everybody, man. You guys know a lot of information. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna put all of you on my watch list now. Y'all know a lot. But it was really great, and I really loved it, and I'm very happy that I sat through the entire event as opposed to just coming in, you know, at the end like comics do. But it was great. Jeanette, you are funny as hell. Your babies, oh my God, they are sweet. And thank you, Vahid, and all of you guys were just, it was fantastic. So thank you very much for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you so much.
Fabulous. Thank you. Andre the Wonder Woman, Jeanette Marin, thank you so much. And thank you, Vahid, everybody that spoke tonight. I think this is one of the best shows we have put on this year.
Yes. Thank you so much, Debbie, for making it happen as well. As all the
First one.
So, as well, and the comedians, it really lightened the mood at the end of the night. We needed that after such a serious conversation. So, thanks for all your participation. Please consider joining us on March 4th as we talk another fun topic of surveillance and Big Brother watching. And we bring in speakers from Electronic Frontier Foundation to join us that evening. I will be sending out the invites for that this weekend. So looking forward to the next event on March 4th. Thanks again.
Thank you. Be safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Debbie.
Hey guys, Will Durst here with a few choice words about a group, a wonderful group doing some great work, and they're called EthicsInTech.com. And I know what you're saying. Ethics in tech, wow, that sounds like an oxymoron. That's like saying vegetarian butcher or kosher pork tartare or Catholic condom supply house or George W. Bush think tank or Donald Trump guide to etiquette and manners. And you're right. But they're here to help, and they do with a smile. Every event that you go to will have a comedy component, along with expert speakers and panel discussions and audience community participation. So come on down, check out ethicsintech.com, and you can see past events, and you can read the blog, and you can see about upcoming events. So ethicsintech.com. It's simple, and you might want to consider volunteering or, throwing them a couple of bucks here and there. Any and or all donations will be accepted and appreciated. Ethics in tech. It doesn't have to be an oxymoron.